I like it.
Honestly, I've been sitting here a little while. Okay. So I'm going to speak to you first of all about Marlon Brando, Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. You all know these guys, I imagine. If you don't know them, please put up your hand. Great. If I ask another question, have any of you heard of Marma or Kalari? If you have heard of Marma or Kalari, put up your hand. Ah, great. Okay. But less. So that's why I'm starting with Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Marlon Brando. So, many years ago, there was a man, Grotowski. He was a Russian theatre director. And he was interested in transformation. He was actually probably the first theatre director from the West who was interested in transformation. And all of these things that we are talking about are transformation. How to transform the mind, the emotions, and the body. Is there a system to do this? Is there a system to do this in a healthy, safe way? What Stanislavski wanted to do is he wanted to explore the nature of this, the nature of the biopsychophysical processes, because he wanted to be able to create a system where his actors could transform into character without leaving residue. Now, we all know, or some of us may know, about Heath Ledger. I personally believe that was because of residue, because he spent too much time living in the role of the Joker, and his mind became disturbed. This is what can happen. I was an actor for many years, and if you work in this method whereby you try to change the way your mind operates, you actually rewire your brain. If I consistently choose anger as a response, I will rewire my brain, and the action potential needed for me to express anger will be less. Similarly, if I choose empathy as a response, the action potential needed to express empathy will be less. So Stanislavski, who was living around 100 years ago in Moscow, was particularly interested in this. And he spent his whole life creating a system of transformation, working from the mind to the emotions to the body. To think is to feel is to be, therefore to think by logical extension is to be. If I was the Queen of England and I had to come here and give this speech, how would I prepare myself? How would I use the magic if as a vehicle to transform into the role of being the Queen of England? I'd probably put on a dress and other things. But he started this work off with this as his approach. Yeah? Approach where you start here and you end here. But he ended his work at the complete opposite point, where he realized actually if you start in the physical body and you move into the emotions, much like laughing yoga, then you move from a physical starting point to an emotional and then a mental end point. So rather than simply trying to change the way the mind operates by going in with a kind of regular talking therapy, and I have nothing against talking therapy, you instead go in to try and change something in the biological, in the organism. So it's a body-oriented psychotherapy. And at the very end of his life, he created a performance which was never performed, but it was rehearsed. For 2 years, it was called Tartuffe. And in this, he communicated the method of how to work on physical action. Unfortunately, no one really understood it. And they threw it away, and they kept doing everything that had been taught previously. And then you ended up with the Strasbourg School in Germany, where the aforementioned Marlon Brando, Robert De Niro, and Al Pacino were students and later graduates and very successful actors. However, some years later, I have to get to Kalari at some point. Some years later, Grotowski, a Polish theatre director, traveled to Moscow, and he found in the archive books about this method that had up until then been completely discarded. And so he went back to Łódź, where he had a theatre called the Theatre of the 13 Rows, and he created what became the origin point of avant-garde theatre. All avant-garde theatre you see now, when you see the magazine in London, Total Theatre magazine, it's all Grotowski. None of this would have existed in the same way had it not been for Grotowski. Now, Grotowski worked with a man, Eugenio Barba. Eugenio Barba was an Italian, And Eugenio Barber then began a series of research expeditions to China to look at Peking opera, to Japan to look at Kabuki and No, and to Kerala. And now we're getting close to Kalari, where he investigated Kathakali, a dance drama where they paint their faces green and they dance with lots of stamping. Now, when he observed Kathakali, he saw that they were extremely flexible. And he asked, how is it you become so flexible? And the answer was, we have Kalari massage every year. What is Kalari massage? Or I should say, Kalarippayat, Kalari massage. So what is this? Okay, he went to see it, and he saw a martial art. A martial art that it turns out is most likely the origin of Kung Fu, Silat, Muay Thai, Karate, and most Asian martial arts, if not all Asian martial arts. Also, he saw a system of treatment which was very possibly the origin of Chinese acupuncture. And this is called Kalari Mama treatment. So in the martial art of Kalari and in the system of Kalari Mama treatment, you're working on 107 Mama points. These are juncture points into the energetical body. That was the reasoning or the story that will be given to you in India. Now, just previously, Candice spoke to us about fascia. Who has heard of fascia? Right, so I won't give too much background, but I'll give a little bit. So, in 2018, there was a research that was done, I believe, in Italy, and they discovered that the most prolific organ in the human body is fascia. This was discovered because for the first time, when they took samples from the body, they froze them. Up until then, when they'd taken them, they had dried them out and they had removed the water content. But when they froze them, they were able to see there was a very large water content. And in fact, this system, or rather, this structure, this tissue, was represented all over the body. It was a collagen surrounding of a water-filled bag, which drained into the lymph. This is in your muscles, this is in your tendons, this is in your ligaments, this is in your eyeball, this is in your tongue, this is everywhere. Now, interstitial fluid, I'm sure we all learnt about at school, but when we were at school, they weren't able to tell us where your interstitial fluid is. It's in your fascia. We now know this. Only since the last 7 years do we know this. But we know that this organ is actually probably the conduit between all of the other systems of your body. So your respiratory system, your cardiovascular system, your lymphatic system, all of the different bodily systems coordinate through each other in fascia, through the fascia. And in fact, probably there will be a new form of medicine evolving in the future called fasciology. And you will have experts in fasciology in hospitals who will be the liaison between the other schools of medicine. This will very possibly happen over the next 20 years. Okay, so now, reverting to what I do, Kalarippayat is a martial art. It is something in between yoga and Kung Fu. The practice of Kalarippayat develops confidence, grounding, focus. It develops a level of physical mobility, which is, imagine Dalzim from Street Fighter, for those of you who have a memory of Street Fighter. Extremely flexible, very elastic body. You have a lot of plyometric exercises. But this is maybe at the higher end. For the more modest practitioner, you work with postures which align and stabilize your energetical body. So your fascia system, the meridian system of China, and the Nadi system of India have an agreement around 70-80% on where the lines are through the body. The lines which transfer tension, which transfer fluid, which probably transfer other not such good things like cancer as well. You have nodal points in that system. These nodal points, when struck, lead to paralysis or lead to harm. But when aligned with each other, they allow the energy to flow through the body properly, and they give us the attributes of focus, discipline, grounding, and so on. So it's a system that can be used very directly by individuals and by groups to improve the attributes that would be necessary for the warrior to go into battle, but also necessary for the modern day businessman, which in this city, considering these roads, is pretty much the same as being a warrior. So, I think I'll leave it there. Very briefly, I'll say that from my point of view, or from what I can offer to the Healthy Minds program, is that I offer one-to-one classes, I offer group classes online. I'm about to release the first ever iPhone and smartphone application teaching this martial art. And also we have a retreat center in Italy, and we're also going to be building a retreat center in Indonesia. So the opportunity of spending longer time immersed in the practice. So it is something that can be done once a week. It's better if it's done twice, thrice, 4 times a week. I have online students I've been working with, some for 4 to 5 years, about 20, 30 at the moment. I've got several thousand people on the online program. But basically, if any of you, what about House? Dr. House? Anyone know Dr. House? So there was an episode of Dr. House where a magician was the patient, and he was lying in the bed, and Dr. House said to him, "Can you show me one of your tricks?" And he said, "Sure I can, yeah, choose a card, any card." And he chose a card. And all of a sudden that card was on the other side of the glass. "Oh, can you explain that to me?" said Dr. House. "Oh no, I can't, because if I explain it, it's no longer magic." Well, that's the difference between Kalari and this. Kalari and what the magician was doing, because as Dr. House said, well, I can explain to you how what I do works, and it's still magic. This is the science that we now have. The science that we now have is explaining to us how these ancient disciplines work. In the next 5 to 10 years, that science will continue. There was a book written by there was a book written called The Holy Science. It was a book written by the teacher of Paramahansa Yoganda. Paramahansa Yoganda was the guy who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, the man who took yoga to America. And in this book, you basically, in the first half of the book, have all of the breakthroughs that we have made in the last century. In the second half of the book are all of these energetical stories. And this is what will be proven in the next century, almost certainly. Okay, thank you for your time. And
thank you, friend. Thank you so much. That's definitely something you do. Come down. But that means, so I'm going to go to Sri Lanka and then to Italy or Indonesia. So I've got a global tour coming up. I think I'm Healthy Minds.
Sounds good. I'm coming.
We're all in. Right, do that.